have to say that I absolutely love physical media, and even more than that, I absolutely love Ninjago. It is something I really do wish LEGO actually kept up with, because for the most part they used to do it, but in most countries now they don't actually do Ninjago DVDs. And the thing is that even in the countries that do have them, they are still restricted to the DVD format, not even Blu-ray. So the thing is that I really do wish LEGO had more of a streamlined release. With every single season came a physical release of each season in a good quality, but unfortunately physical media is kind of going by the wayside, so it's just something they haven't really done. But like I said, the thing is that they used to do it, and most countries actually did have a lot of Ninjago releases, and I'm gonna be honest, the more you look into it, the more the rabbit hole gets deeper, because you will notice that there is a lot of really weird oddities when it comes to Ninjago physical media. So I want to bring you along for a journey as we explore the weird world of Ninjago DVDs, because the more you look into it, the funnier it definitely gets. Now I will get this out the way and say most countries that did support Ninjago physical media actually did have somewhat of a streamlined release at the very least of the first 7 seasons, and for the most part there's nothing really outright wrong with them, but there are a couple really fun examples when it does come to the art of them. Now I am the most familiar with the UK releases because that's where I live. Being British means I'm much more accompanied to these releases, and the UK releases for the most part were actually completely fine. I'm gonna have obviously examples up, but the thing is that apart from a lot of retreading over certain seasons, they were actually fairly decent. A lot of them weren't actually renders of the show themselves and more just minifigure variants in more of a CG aspect, but the thing is that for the most part the covers were fine. A small oddity you could note was the fact that the Pilot's UK release did in fact have all the ninja in their ZX suits, which is inaccurate, but that's not honestly too bad, and most of the seasons actually would go through and would be completely fine. Again, a little oddity here and there, but the initial lobotomy when it comes to these covers is the fact that you get to season 4 and it's just completely wrong. Season 4 was the first major instance of an anomaly for the UK releases, because the few that we actually did get were just weird. I mean, there was one that was fine, you had all the ninja in their Zukin outfits, which was completely fine, but then there was a release of the first half of season 4 on DVD that had Chen, but in the background had all the ninja in their ZX outfits for no apparent reason. For some reason the ZX ninja popped up in this specific instance, and that's not even the worst instance of it, because the official release of the full season when it comes to Tournament of Elements had this cover which had Chen and the ZX ninja again, but to make it even worse, or even more funny may I add, the main feature of this poster, or of the art specifically, is Lloyd in Cole's ZX uniform. This is the only instance where this has ever popped up. This is completely unique to this DVD cover. There is a Lloyd with a Cole ZX outfit. What is this? It is so crazy to think that this is actually the case, because this is the only major time where a UK physical release was just really weird, because the season 5 one was just a poster, the season 6 one was just a shortened poster, Day of the Parted was just a poster, and season 7's was again just a condensed version of the poster. The other ones were completely fine. It's just season 4 was the only one that had an anomaly, if not this most specific anomaly, and the reason for this video. And you may think, well, that's pretty weird, the UK surely had some weird releases, but you go to other countries and you realize that all the other countries also had really weird instances. Some of them are fairly consistent and some of them are fairly fine, but honestly, you'd be surprised to hear how many of the countries had even weirder ones than that. Take the release cycle for Australia and New Zealand for example. For the most part, they were actually fairly fine. There actually was a lot of really cool art, and there wasn't really a definitive instance of anything being out of place. They actually were fairly consistent, which is really weird to note. There was a couple weird renders here and there, which I do find interesting. For example, the Skybound ones were just a little strange looking, and so was the season 4 ones, but for the most part, they were at the very least accurate to what they actually had. Although season 7 was the notable instance where it actually did go slightly downhill, because the season 7 ones just looked like knockoffs in a really weird way. You can actually see the Wu one, for example, where he just looks really strange, and the one with Kai and Nia where they're actually just kind of on their dragon, but the dragon doesn't look correct, and the ninja also look weird as well. It's a really weird looking cover. but it has nothing on what they released after this. After the release of Hand of Time, they actually went back and they re-released all of the seasons individually as full seasons. However, all they did was just recolor the pilot Kai art into different colors for each of the individual seasons. And you may think for the most part that's fine, but there's no relation to any of the seasons whatsoever, and there's ninja colors that didn't even exist at the time. Of course, you've got the black, the green, the blue, the red, like you got all the ones that you would expect. However, there was a brown one at one point, which I guess you could say is to represent Dareth, but it's a bit strange nonetheless. There's one that's just a slightly lighter blue, which again you could technically attribute to Nia, but I don't think she was really using those colors at the time. There's a really off-white grey looking variant, which is not Zane's colors whatsoever. There's a purple one, which I guess is for Little Nelson, but also still strange, and there's a very deep purple one as well. Just another really weird instance where they just had really random colors. These releases are really weird to actually see. I guess if you owned them all, you could make the argument that they're quite consistent and they look like a proper collection, but I am going to argue that they're just very strange covers nonetheless, and the existence of them is really strange. The next country, America. They don't exactly have too many weird releases, I'm actually gonna give them that. For the most part, they actually did just use the season posters, which is actually quite nice to actually see. And also, you'll find that America did actually release Season 8 on DVD. They did an extra season, whereas most countries actually didn't even get that. But they do have two really weird anomalies, which I do find interesting to note. They have something called Ninjago and Friends, which was a DVD that had the pilot episodes, which is fine, there is nothing wrong with that whatsoever. However, this cover has a version of Jay with his rebooted outfit and the ZX hood, and I think it's referencing a minifigure from one of the first 4+ sets that we got, but at the same time, just such a weird release. And honestly, a less notable one, but still I wanted to bring up nonetheless. Like I said, all these releases are all on the DVD format, which is not even a high definition format. However, for some reason, America seems to be relatively exclusive to a Blu-ray release of the second season of Ninjago. This is the only instance. They don't have any other versions of this. No other seasons actually achieve this format. However, for some reason, they have the full season 2 on Blu-ray. So I guess if you're in America, you did have Ninjago episodes in high definition. It's just really weird that this is the only one. I'm going to quickfire a couple more countries just so you really understand the scope of it, because it seems to be that every single country got at least one of them. Belgium, for example, they for the most part actually had quite consistent themes or quite consistent art. It was mainly just the posters. However, for some reason, the Season 3 rebooted DVD just had the minifigure of Zane and Pixel. There is no other reason for this. They could have just used the poster, but they simply didn't. And again, I've never seen this art anywhere else. Also, not to mention, they were also one of the few countries that actually put Season 9 on a DVD, so that definitely felt worth note. Denmark and Sweden actually had identical release cycles. They're the exact same art, just in the different language, exact same cataloging. Honestly, they were really consistent between the two. The only thing is that that really weird Skybound art did pop back up for these releases specifically. I really don't know what the problem with this art is, it just looks weird. Honestly, I don't know why it was used in more than one country. It's really strange to look at, but those two had identical releases. Poland also did release up until Season 9. Their posters were a little more interesting. They used a lot of different art. Honestly, just a lot of different art that came from other countries as well. And I will also note that a lot of their covers was them just splitting up the main poster. Best example you can really see that is the Season 8 releases, because they took the image of all the 6 ninja and they separated them, one with 3 and the other with 3. It's honestly a fairly creative way of making technically unique art. And I will say, I respect it for the most part. It's just a shame that a lot of the covers just look a little strange because it's really weird CG rendering. And the last for the quickfire is the country of Hungary. They actually only released up till the end of Season 2. They didn't release anything beyond that point, which is really interesting. However, it was still over 8 separate releases because each DVD only contained 3, maybe 4 episodes. So they stretched it out, and if you are in that country, it would have been a lot of different releases and probably very inconvenient at that. But I do find it interesting to note that they just never went past Season 2. It's honestly really interesting to note, and I wish I understood why. But honestly, none of these countries pale in comparison to the last one up. And that is the country of Germany. They have, by far, the weirdest release I've ever seen when it comes to Ninjago, and more specifically the art. For the most part, it starts out fairly okay at best. There's some weird renders here and there, but for the most part, it's what I've come to expect when it comes to most of these seasonal releases. However, this is the only country that actually continue to upload all of the episodes onto the physical format, and they go on for a very long time, and you can kind of tell that they're the only country who did it, because the art is fascinating. The furthest any of the countries gotten was season 9, and you can see that because Germany followed their trend, where for the most part they just did buy the actual posters. There was a couple weird instances and a couple little tidbits here and there, but I will say specifically, this is the case of they actually didn't really seem to know what they were going to do beyond that point. Season 10 was represented by just CG renders of all the Legacy Ninja, which is perfectly fine, but it's season 11 onwards where it gets fascinating. All of the covers beyond this point are just riddled with this weird art. Season 11's represented by all the different Forbidden Spinjitzu Ninja in different poses on essentially an image collage. All of them look really weird, they look almost knockoff like, and honestly, I don't really know what they were doing when they tried to get this done. There is not a single one of these posters that I don't look at and just think, that's really weird. It's so strange, and honestly, I would like to know who was actually in charge of doing this, because the season 11 ones with all the Forbidden Ninja look really weird, and then you just get further and further, and it just gets even more messy at that. I mean, the Prime Empire ones are again represented by this really weird looking art. It is marginally better than the season 11 art, but what I'll find interesting is that the second DVD that has the Prime Empire Ninja on it also is the start of Master of the Mountain. What's it doing on that DVD? It just becomes a really weird instance of seasons overlapping depending on the DVD. It is really strange, because like I said, Master of the Mountain starts on a Prime Empire DVD, and Master of the Mountain ends on a Master of the Mountain DVD, and then you get over to the island, which obviously has the island poster, but then it has the start of Seabound on it, and then you get to the Seabound DVD, which has the rest of it, and then you get to Crystallize, which luckily keeps all of it kind of condensed. But funnily enough, even though the episodes actually get back in line with each other, the art got worse. The DVDs is the most interesting instance because for some reason the 3 crystallized DVDs that Germany released all just separated the main poster into different subsections. Some of them had certain characters and the other ones had the rest. There was one where the main thing was Lloyd, there's another one where there isn't really a main character, it's just Pixel, Kai and Skylar, and then the last one just has Wu with Cole and Jay. It is really weird to look at, and they've just separated it off in a really weird way to do it. And honestly, they all just look so out of place because of it. And they didn't even stop with Crystallized. They're the only country that have actually put Dragon's Rising on physical media, and this really weird case just does nothing but continue. But instead of just separating random pieces of random different posters, you'll find that all of the Dragon's Rising covers, sometimes you may get a poster, but for the most part, they quite literally just take maybe random renders of characters or random shots of certain episodes and they just slap it on the front. It is so weird to look at. And again, they split season 1 and season 2 of Dragon's Rising into 10 different DVDs. It is so weird to look at and just feels wrong. Because yeah, if they add a poster on, that's all well and good, but when you have ones that are just Sora stood there with a dragon, it's just really weird to actually look at. The Dragon's Rising releases really do feel weird. I don't know what they were doing. And Joe gets worse. It doesn't stop there! Germany have also committed to doing a CD line of all the Ninjago episodes. And when I say all of the episodes, I quite literally mean it. They have done every single episode on the CD format, and it has led to, again, really weird looking art. It starts off relatively fine, just a ninja hero there. Honestly, it is relatively fine for the most part, but again, you get later on and it just gets weirder. Again, you have CDs representing all the different Legacy Ninja, and funnily enough, the Legacy Ninja represents Ninjago as a show up until the end of the season 11. Why? But then you get even further in and you just get weirder art. The crystallized poster thing is split up even further on the CDs. It just gets worse and worse the more you look at it. Germany has got by far the weirdest instance of Ninjago box art. I do find it really interesting to note that this is truly the case. And honestly, I'm not giving it enough justice. If you go to the Ninjago wiki and look at physical releases and you sort it by Germany, you can see so much art that I'm not even showing off that is just really really strange looking. I'm looking at so many different instances and so many different covers that just confuse me, because not only, like I said, do I bounce between different looking art, they just bounce between random screenshots from episodes, random characters out of nowhere, really weird looking renders. It's just really strange to look at, and I would like to know why this is truly the case. I will say, I do respect the fact that Germany did keep on the releases, and I do wish to an extent every single country did do this, because I would love a full range of Ninjago media for my own collection. But unfortunately, we just didn't get it, and I'm gonna be honest, if this is what we would have gotten if we did have it, I honestly wouldn't have been happy with it, because proper art does go a very long way, and I just think what they were doing for the German releases is just kind of bad. But when you do look at it on an overall, you do realize how weird of a rabbit hole this actually is. The more you look into the art, the more you find these oddities. I was literally finding oddities on the go. I find it really interesting to note that things like this exist, and when you look at all the different countries and all the different variants that actually do exist, it really does find itself to be a really interesting case. I honestly recommend you go and look at so many of these covers. I try my best to get as much in as I can, but I feel like I really haven't done this topic enough justice, because I can't, because I would have to show you every single release, and it's literally hundreds of them. So my recommendation, go look into it. Go look into the Ninjago physical media space. Go look at all these interesting oddities, because like I said, I really haven't scratched the surface. I didn't even bring up all the weird movie releases. They're mostly consistent. Every once in a while though, there is just some weird art, but that's kind of just beside the point. The funniest thing for me is the fact that I now want some of these. I really want to get that Black Coal ZX. That thing has fascinated me, and is, like I said, is the reason I even made this video. I really want a physical version of that. For me, the weirdest Ninjago physical cover I own is the UK version of the second half of Rebooted, because it has Golden Lloyd on it. And even though I understand why it exists, because obviously the whole context of Golden Power, but it just feels like a really weird cover for the season itself. But like I said, that doesn't even pale in comparison to the other ones. So I really do want to get one of the really weird ones for my Ninjago collection. But what Ninjago physical media do you own? Do you own any of these oddities? I would love to see some images if you actually have them, because I can look at these images or these official promo images of them, and that's all well and good, but actually seeing someone with it in hand would be really interesting to actually see, because I think this is fascinating, and I feel like I haven't even scratched the surface of this topic. And has this made you want some of these oddities yourself? Do you want some of this weird art for your own collection? I would love to know, because this is a rabbit hole that I have nowhere near gave up on, even after talking about it, because this is fascinating. And I also can't wait to see what Germany do with the third season of Dragons Rising. But that is about it for today, you guys, and thank you very much for watching. Take care. Okay,